young people to have mentors to know to turn to and guide you.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Gabriel Deji, the author of The Escape, and today we'll be having a very special episode. We're going to be talking about protest blackness and the film industry. So today our special guest is going to be Hajer, and she's going to introduce herself. So thank you, Hajer, for coming. Please tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for having me on your channel. My name is Hajer. I am a podcast host. I'm the host of a film and television podcast called Downtime with Hajer. So basically what I do is I discuss films and television shows by focusing on particular topics that are interesting or pertinent to the show's message, or to the vision of the storytelling, and try and make it digestible and fun for people who want to learn more about film and TV. So yeah, that's me.
Wow. And Hajer, you've also recently been elected the Afro-Caribbean Society president for your university. So please tell us a bit about that.
Well, yes, I have been. So thank God I was elected to be the president of my university, ACS. So I go to the University of Bristol. So what exactly would you want to know about that? Do you want to know the process?
So even before you're elected, I did see some of your promises that you made and your pledges. I found them quite interesting. So please talk to me a bit about what you promised and talk to us about what your plan is to do as the president.
Okay, so my campaign slogan was engage, adapt to elevate, because I felt that there was already a lot that the previous committee had done, and what I wanted to do was actually build on what they had done. Because for me, I didn't want to kind of promote myself as a rebranding kind of person, because one thing that I think was really important to me was to develop traditions. And you can only develop traditions when you create a history of a certain thing. So for me, that was kind of taking what the ACS was and developing it each year, so that the new committee will recognize an old committee's traditions, but put their own spin on it and just kind of increase the cultural awareness. My campaign promises, I know the ones that I think were the most important to me was, so giving back to the community, particularly giving blood, because sickle cell, for example, is something that plagues our community particularly, and I thought that would be a really good way to give back to our community, because we are underrepresented as Black people in blood donations. So that was one of the things that was really important to me. It was also important to me to create awareness around mental health and create more spaces for Black people to just kind of be. So for me, it was stuff like paint therapy workshops where everyone could just kind of relax, get to know each other, but also do something that relieves from the stress of university, and just everyday life struggles. So
wow.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. And you spoke about your podcast, and I guess your expertise in film and movies is what's going to orientate us around this episode right now.
My expertise.
No, you have quite a deep insight. So there's one episode of your podcast which is quite interesting. You're speaking about Westworld and devs. So please speak to us about technological determinism, Karl Marx, and what you're speaking about in that episode.
Wow. Oh my God. So that was one of the hardest episodes that I've ever recorded, because I really, really enjoyed the topics, right? And I wanted to do it justice, but it's so complex. But my interest from it really stems from the fact that when people often talk about sci-fi, I feel like it's always something that seems so far removed from the world that we have. And what I really enjoy about Westworld and devs and the conversation about technological determinism is the way that it's so you can't escape how close it is to the life that we are living now. And so discussing technological determinism, which, okay, I'm going to explain the term for people who are, just joining us. Technological determinism is the idea that, like, as a society develops technology, it kind of changes and alters our modes of living. And particularly what is interesting to me was the idea of algorithmic determinism, which is, we all use algorithms in our daily life, but kind of a more sinister idea of how a government or a company could take our data and our information and sell us a life that they think that we want. Basically determining how our future goes out without us even realizing. So yeah, that was that episode.
Wow. So that's quite interesting, and this might throw you off a little bit, but since the idea of technological determinism is also linked to fate, usually when you speak about fate, it's from a very removed philosophical perspective. But now, when we're talking about technology, social media, the internet, all of that is so close to our realities now. So if we're going into the idea of protest, we've seen what's happened recently, the Black Lives Matter protests. Do you believe that we can actually make change when the people in charge, who are so close to technology, are controlling things for their benefit? That's just...
That's such a tough question. And I think, what a great question, actually. I think that at the end of the day, the power rests in the individuals who give up their data to these people. And it is true that we've kind of already gone too far, surrendered so much of ourselves. However, like, I think people tend to forget that they are the few and we are the many. So if you are looking at it from a perspective of, can we, even though we might not have proximity to power, can we, create change? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. The people who are change makers, were rarely ever part of the minority, or the part of the 1%, or the people who, control the way that our lives are, determined. But I think one thing that we have to acknowledge is the fact that because these people kind of control our media and our news and our, and a lot of the consumption in our lives, we have to be actively resisting, these forms of indoctrination and, determinism and all these suggestions for our life, in order to really kind of divert from a path that that it seems the most likely, and kind of choose a better path. Johnny, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say, and I think our viewers will understand as well. So moving on from that, Karl Marx, who's the person who created the idea of technological determinism, one thing that he also spoke about was the proletariat gaining control. So that's the working class, the bottom of society gaining control, those who are being oppressed gaining control. And that is essentially what protest is. So what does protest mean to you?
Okay. So obviously, protest is just, revolt, in my opinion. I think it's just revolt. And I feel like the word revolt makes people think violence and stuff, but no, I think it's just kind of a rejection of the status quo, and, an active movement to say, no, this is not acceptable, and we're not going to do this. And I think that it is incredibly important, especially as young people, to be protesting, even psychologically, question, challenge, reject things that you have accepted to be true. Because there's just so much that I feel like once you actually start to investigate your own biases and the things that you believe, you'd be like, but why do I think this?
Exactly.
And then you trace it back, and it's like someone wanted you to think this, and now that you've adopted that thought, you behave a certain way. And who's gaining? Are you gaining? I think you have to kind of have an active analysis of your actions and how it relates to what you desire for your community.
I think that's very true. And if you want to read more about the idea of free will and activism, all our viewers should buy The Escape: A Tale of Change and Revolution.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
So moving
the
on
most
from
brilliant book.
thank you. So moving on from this idea of protest, but still linking on from it, someone who really did fight to reject the status quo and all of these things that the oppressive society was putting on him was Malcolm X. And you spoke about the Malcolm X movie on your channel. So please tell us a bit about what you discovered from watching the movie.
Oh my God. So I love Malcolm X. You know, if you listen to the episode, please do go and listen.
Yep.
You'll hear that he's somebody who has inspired me, because I just love what he stands for, you know, and because Malcolm X is so strongly against systematic oppression, I think he just makes me like, yes. Yes, yes, like, no. Can we circle back to the question again? Sorry.
So yeah, what did you think about the movie and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, okay, so what I learned from it, yeah, thank you. What I learned from it was, first of all, what I learned from it was how storytelling, especially by white media, frames our own history. And it basically just even reminded me about how we need to be the ones telling our own stories. Because when you read about Malcolm X, you know, from white media, when you watch even his interviews where you can literally see him speaking, the questions that the journalists are asking, the way that they are asking it, the words that they are choosing, they're doing that to get a certain response, and that helps them create their narrative. There's so many times when he's speaking and it's just like, the journalists, I just want to ask them, do you have any comprehension skills? Like, that's not what he said. And so watching Spike Lee make a movie about one of the greatest Black men in history just gives you a perspective about who this man really was. And, you know, nobody else could have made this film. And I truly believe that nobody else could have made this film, because when you're doing research for something like an autobiographical film, I hardly believe that members of the Nation of Islam and people who knew Elijah Muhammad and people who knew Malcolm X are going to just sit down and talk to any white director. No, they're not. You know, they're just not going to do that. And that's what I really enjoyed and learned about the film, this idea of, you know, a Black narrative told by Black people. And I think it's so important.
Wow, that's an excellent insight into what you had there. And I think it's very key that the view that we have of Malcolm X has been quite whitewashed, because essentially all he was really saying was that he will fight for his Blackness by all means necessary. And the white oppressive world told us that that's too radical an idea. So that's terrible. So are there any other examples of protest that you've seen in cinema?
So, you know, protest in cinema is a huge deal from the, like, especially, you know, after World War II, you know, this idea, a lot of films, especially when you're thinking about American cinema, focused on, you know, the fighting communism, protesting communism, you know, the American way of life, the Western way of life, as opposed to, you know, oppressive systems of government that were gonna try and invade America. So, but I'm particularly interested in films or movies that films and TV shows that use protest in a unique way. So one of my favorite depictions of protest in film is in this German film called The Lives of Others. So it's not a very like loud form of protesting. There's no people really protesting in the streets. But the story basically follows this man who's assigned to watch this communist person. So obviously, he's watching this person who's from the East Berlin, from the other side of the wall. The wall has, you know, the wall is still up, tensions are still high, and he basically keeps listening to this man's life, who is supposed to be an enemy, supposed to be a suspect. But as he listens to him and surveils his whole life, he learns more about him. He becomes sympathetic to him. And I don't want to spoil the end of the film in
Mhm.
case somebody wants to watch it because it's so brilliant. But the film basically explores about how, by putting yourself in certain situations, you protest the way that you're meant to think. Because this man is a soldier, he's following orders. And there's this idea of protesting higher forms of authority. And I love that they use a character who is so stoic, so dutiful, so, focused on their, so patriotic. They want to be this good person, they want to serve their country. And I like how it uses that to kind of highlight the hypocrisy that that sort of system can have. And it's like, you're fighting, you claim to be fighting for the freedom of other people so that they can protest, but you're infringing on their own freedom. And how that conflict sits with a human being. It's really, really great film. I really
Wow.
suggest it.
That's quite interesting. So my next question to you is, do you think that cinema and film can be used itself as a form of protest?
100%. This is my bag. This is my film. I think there's no better form of protest than art. There's nothing. I genuinely believe that nothing can get to the heart of people the way that art can. Like, of course, you need the movers and the shakers. You need policymakers, and you need, enforcement, and you need the people who are going to bring in the change via economic or political means, of course. However, what inspires the radical shifts in mentality, which actually is what pushes people to make these changes, is art. And I don't think that is even arguable. And I even wanted to mention another form of protest that I really enjoy in film or TV is in The Handmaid's Tale, which is dealing with issues of female disenfranchisement, and how women can be subjected to a life that is just unimaginably hard and painful, and they have no agency and no freedom. And every act of defiance builds towards a revolution, and I think that perfectly encapsulates just how much power a film or a movie or art can have. Because I feel like with each art, with each movie that comes out, with each book that's written, with each poetry that you hear, like, or poem that you hear, the ideas are coming more. You're more radicalized. You're more on edge. And I think that especially for us who are within the struggle, who suffer the consequences, for example, of racism, it gets us to see so much, and opens our eyes. And I think because of how art makes people feel, it really drives you to do more and be more. And I think that is the most important part of change. Yeah.
That's very powerful. So thank you very much for being on this episode today. It's been great
Thank you for having me. Everyone, please go and read The Escape.
Yes. Go read The Escape.
Period. Okay.
Yeah. And also, I will leave the link to your podcast below in this episode. Everyone, make sure to go visit Downtime Podcast. It's an excellent podcast, excellent insight into film. So thank you again for being here. Is there any last word that you want to give our viewers?
My last word is Black Lives Matter. Take care of yourselves, take care of your mentals. Stay safe in this pandemic, and listen to my episodes and tell me what you think of them.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.